Today I'd kind of like to talk to you about the forum campaign as opposed to the live campaign. Now, for those of you not aware, uh, doing the live campaign versus the forum campaign was always kind of a weird decision to make. But I always wanted the forum campaigns to campaign to continue. Unfortunately, several of the players didn't want to play the same kind of campaign, basically. So the forum campaign eventually split into two campaigns. One group that wanted to go adventuring, dungeons, fights, etc. And the other group who wanted to build an empire. Anschweiz build an empire! And they go, World War! No, so we had two groups. I'm going to tell you about the first group, or excuse me, the split group first, which is Rory, Javan, and Higaide. Now, I'm not actually sure the last time I updated you, to be completely honest with you, on their story. So I'm going to start with kind of where I feel things got really relevant, which is they decided to head down south to the show territories because they got wind that something was happening with regards to the humans. Now, for those of you not aware, the humans have kind of had a bit of a sorry lot over the last 3 months or so. However long it's been, actually... It's been about 5 months, in character, in lore, since the campaign began. Only 5 months, that's a weird feeling. And so, the humans have had kind of a sorry lot. First, their island nearly disintegrates from around them, causing mass panic and chaos, as well as humans being exposed to things they'd never been exposed to before, like eyesight problems. Because they'd never had bad eyesight before. They'd never had to have something like this before. And, sickness, disease, that sort of thing. So all of a sudden, all these new infirmities of being normal mortals were suddenly being thrust upon them. The humans didn't take it that well. A lot of them tried to flee in their particular ships, but their ships were not what you'd call ocean seaworthy, and a large amount of them sank. A lot of humans died. A few of them managed to escape and make it to the mainland. Some of them were taken in by certain groups, but a decent amount of those humans were then exploited. Some of the humans ended up settling in Holtberg. Some of them have been basically carried there by other forces, people who are not the humans themselves, because they lacked the ability to escape the Vasey and Lascelles. And so a lot of the humans were basically full-on refugees. They had completely lost control of Vasey and Lascelles. Vasey and Lascelles is 100% under the control of... Well, no one's actually sure. The assumption is that Tumarok are controlling it, but... Anyways, so, having become this refugee situation, it turns out that someone down in the show territories had basically offered a deal. They said, you know what the humans are? Cheap labor. So they set up this big old thing. They will pay the expense in order to ship all the humans down on various ships, basic naval ships, down south to the show territories, and these can work in my plantations and boost my economy by making sure that, and of course, because of the way that the show work and the way that show politics work, it's not just about, the fact that this is cheap labor. This is seen as a sign of a gesture of goodwill, proving that the show involved, it's several, so I'm not going to name any names, but the Burun involved are all saying, yes, look at how gracious and kind we are, look at how superior we are to our fellows, because we are offering this helping hand to these poor, undeserving humans. Now, because of, the show politics of appearances and all that fun stuff, so the adventuring party, which again, Rory, Higaide, and Javan, two of whom are human themselves, say, oh my god, we've got to get down there and help these poor people. So they get down to the show territories and start looking into it. Turns out, they find an old friend there, Sethos, who's actually a Burun himself. And Sethos has actually been involved in this whole thing, as well as the... I hesitate to put this word to it, but it's the only thing that's accurate. Civil war that's happening amongst the show right now. Now remember, the show culturally are a little different than the other races. So, and for those of you curious, the show, if you didn't watch my video, what do I call them? Concerning Primus, about the show culture. The show consists of the Burun, the Moorsmen, and the Sclavi. So, the show, they aren't actually fighting anyone. At least not with spears or swords or magic or whatever. They're fighting each other with words and ideas and their usual appearance politics. In other words, whichever side gets the most people agreeing that they're the correct side, that's the side that basically wins. And it's basically the alterationists versus the traditionalists are the two groups. You could probably understand based on those names, but the alterationists want to get rid of the current social caste system because the show culture are very caste based and just start a new system entirely. It is worth noting most of the alterationists do not actually have a lot of idea where to go with that. The traditionalists say what we have right now works and has worked for 3.5 centuries. Why change it? So they're advocating that they just stay the course, stay the way things are now. As you might imagine, the traditionalists have the lion's share of the support amongst the politicians in the show culture. The alterationists are much less, much more in the minority as far as support and garnering, but they seem to be being funded by certain people, like, say, Lord Farron of Silent Blade. I hope you recognize that name. If not, that's okay. Either way, the two sides are basically even, and I, as a GM, designed that deliberately to ensure that the players could have some influence on the series of events there. No influence has been done yet, and may never be done at this point, because of events that we'll get to, but either way, regardless. So, they go down here. Sethos is in the middle of this civil war. He's on the side of the alterationists, if it's not obvious, and he tries to get his old friends, Rory Higati and Javan, to join him, and they basically say, no, we're busy. They're looking for these humans. So it turns out Sethos, it's kind of complicated. Basically, Rory nearly kills a guy. I think I did mention this before, because I remember talking about it. Rory, the player, insisted that he shouldn't have to kill this guy, even though there was no malignant intent on my behalf. I just thought it would be a fantastic story element and a great way for Rory, the character, to advance as a character. But Rory, the player, was adamant against that, so instead he just near mortally wounded the guy. And the guy died in the hospital bed later. But we didn't actually kill him on the spot. Because it wasn't like a deliberate thing. There was no malevolence on Rory's part. It's not like he was evil. He was upset, wound up. He's terrified because of this whole situation with the humans. And so there's this conflict moment, and a few other little tidbits happen. And it turns out that there's a group of people there who are also working with Sethos and the alterationists. And they feed this information to Sethos, because Sethos, when he meets them, doesn't think they're them. He actually doesn't think that's Rory and Higati and Javan. And considering Javan has crystals growing out of his skin, it's not actually that hard of a sell. But in his opinion, there's enough evidence to declare that they're not them. And so he basically tries to lead them into a trap. And Rory and Higati are like, no, dude, you have to... They're not even aware that there's a trap there. They're just trying to ardently convince Sethos to join them, basically, that they're on the right side here. And eventually they approach Sethos, shall we say, aggressively, which causes the Sclavi bodyguards nearby to charge out like, no, we'll defend you, and leads to a fight with a large creature. Now, those of you who've been following the live campaign know the name of these creatures. These are called Sentinels. They are fairly large, fairly tall mechanical beings who are distinguished from one another. None of them look identical to each other. They all have different stylings, different trims, different appearances, different paint jobs, all that fun stuff. And this Sentinel comes out and fights them. They manage to do damage to the thing, which causes it to do its emergency recall teleport. And they win the fight, but then they immediately have to get the hell, go hide because the reinforcements are coming. So after having done all of this, they basically convince Sethos that they are who they are, although Sethos is still really not sure what to make of them, and basically says, I wash my hands of it, I'm not doing any of this. And they manage to sneak on board an airship. This airship is... A couple of points about the airship. The airship is large and bulky and crude, but it also contains things like a library, and with a lot of technical manuals in it, and a cafeteria and that kind of a thing. And it also happens to have been built very recently, like within the last couple of weeks. I gave an exact time, but it's very recent construction, which is insane to think about. So this thing takes off, carries them. It's a few days' travel. Rory and Higati kibitz for a bit and peruse. Javan... Javan... Javan is in a stasis crate, something they use to maintain food for large periods of time. And that means that for him, no time is passing. Like, he enters the crate, and then when they take the lid off, it's been just an instant for him. So he's just in this stasis crate this whole time, for like 4 days total, I think. So the airship takes about 3 days to travel all the way over to the Nevere region. And because of the fact that I mentioned the Sentinels earlier, you probably understood that, yes, these are the Vyotians, and they are interacting with the show, although nobody's entirely certain why, but the politics of that probably don't matter. They unload them, and they tell the humans you have a choice. It's very simple. You are food! Oh, no, I'm kidding. No, it's very simple. They inform the humans, another human actually informs the humans, it's very simple. You can decide to work, and we'll try to find some job for you within our organization, within the people that we control. Or you can decide, you know what, I've had a really horrible 5 months, why don't I just go and take a rest? And there's basically a refugee area with apartment complexes and, a grocery store and a living area and a recreation area. It's just basically a town that has been constructed for people who don't have a job but are going to be subsisted off of the Vyotian organization. And so and I'm sorry, there's also a third option. This is kind of important. Augmentation. So basically, a human can be converted into a sentinel. That's what it boils down to. The idea is your soul gets concentrated into something else. They don't know details yet, but there is something else that happens to the soul, and therefore the entity of the original being gets put into a new body, hence the Sentinels. And the Sentinels have several advantages, obviously: size, longevity, strength. Their scanners work differently. So, for example, they don't need to eat or drink, but they do require a power source. Nobody's 100% sure what that is yet. But for example, you can just look as a sentinel at a lovingly made pie made by your sister, and they can taste the pie by scanning it, basically, if that makes any sense. And it's kind of a different thing. Rory and Higade say, no, we're not doing any of that. We're just going to back away from that. They decide they don't want to get a job, so they go to the loafers area, as they themselves describe it, and they settle in, they get an apartment. Look around, get some food, cook some food. Javan's let out, finally. Like I said, 4 days. And Javan's like, thank God. And Javan starts thinking maybe there's some connection here between the weird liquid he saw that he assumed was a form of blood coming out of the Sentinel that they damaged all the way back in the show territory, and what's going on here with the air element, excuse me. There was a crucial moment that I skipped over, forgive me, that is actually important. Higade accidentally discharged a little bit, and for a little bit there, Javan actually thought Higade was a fairy. I don't mean he's got the wings. I mean in terms of his elemental makeup, he seemed more fairy than any other race. It did pass after a little bit, but they're not 100% sure what happened there. Excuse me. So, having done this, Javan starts experimenting, and in so doing, Javan unleashes something. I'm going to keep a little bit of a tight lid on this. Javan, actually, the player, knows what I'm talking about. But regardless, Javan suddenly loses all his memories and starts acting very unusually and childlike. And he's like, I don't know. He literally builds a fort out of cushions. It's not a joke. While he's doing this, Rory is trying to take charge of the situation and figure out what the heck is going on. Tries to, get stuff in town. There's no shops of an adventuring type whatsoever. This is literally a place where you can procure food for free, because there's no payment here. And that's about it. There's a little bit of a rec area, that kind of a thing. Higade is just kind of going with the flow at the moment. And the three of them are like, okay, why don't we see what jobs are available? Let's try and look into this. And they get some information. Oh, and then there's a fairly large reveal. I'm sorry, this is actually one of the bigger reveals I have. It's funny to me because this has been so normal in my mind for so long. I forgot how big of a deal this was. So the Vyotians were humans. Note how I phrased that. They were humans. The Viosians have had such an invested interest in the humans and have been spending so much of their time and effort on them since the campaign began, actually. But the reason why is finally revealed because, and I quote, the Viosians are looking after their own kind. Now, there's a distinction made between the Viosian elders and the other Viosians who have been upgraded to Sentinels. For example, no party member of any of the three campaigns has actually met a Viosian elder thus far. They're off. Well, we're not sure what. But when I say elder, I mean the ones who came to this continent after having fought some great foe and defeated that great foe. I'll let you deliberate and decide on what exactly the great foe is that they could have defeated in the past. But regardless, the Viosians, having successfully defeated them, then had a bit of an incident. Because the greater bulk of the Viosian people, and I mean the huge overwhelming majority of them, decided that they wanted new worlds to conquer. And the Viosians are very advanced. Their airships can go into space. So they did. And then they were destroyed. So the Viosian elders who remain are the only Viosians who remain, effectively, at least of the original crop. Now, they have since, been trying to interact with the humans that they have found on Visayan Lascelle and Aphis Lascelle, and trying to get them to, be taken care of, because all of a sudden humans are getting close to becoming an endangered species at this point. So they're kind of interested in their well-being. That's why they have an entire town which is being provided for free for humans to live in if they want to. No cost, no requirement, just here you go, here's your life. And of course, if you want to work, that's available, but it's not mandatory. So, Rory and Higaide, just the two of them, because Javan's off building his fort at the moment. Rory and Higaide are like, okay, why don't we try to take a job as an elite? So they go to another town entirely, which is basically a fort. A lot of automated defenses. Well, I shouldn't say that. They are automated. Nobody knows that. There's a lot of cannons. There's a lot of turrets. There's a lot of firepower in this place. They go in and they're like, okay, hey, we would like to, we'd like to sign up. We want to be elites. We want to do adventuring stuff. Now, bit of an out-of-character thing. I've been leading towards this for the last few months of real time, because one of the things that this party told me is we want more of an adventure-y thing. We want to go do dungeons, and we want to go fight stuff. Still have some plot relevance, but not the plot-laden heavy stuff that I do in the other two campaigns. So this has been me building up to this and guiding towards this whole time. Having Rory, Higaide, and Javan do missions for the Viosians. Anyways, so they get their mission assignments from a human, of course, and the human is like, we know everything about you. We know Javan's there. There's no reason to hide him. It's fine. We understand he's part of your team. What am I hearing? Anyways, sorry. I'm hearing something outside. It's weird. Yeah, it's outside. Whatever. Oh, and now I'm being weirded out because of the outsideness. So they decide to get their first elite mission. Now, as of the time I'm telling you this, they are actually in the middle of still kind of setting up and prepping for this mission. I'll give you some of the details of the mission itself. So there has been an artifact found. I actually kind of screwed up on this. It's my fault. But anyways, there's an artifact they found called a Geirland, which is one of the Geirland coins they encountered forever ago. And it's been found being taken into a vault of one of the wealthy practitioners of Thromata, which is a town in the southern Al-Arkas state of the former Navarra Confederacy. And they want the group to go and retrieve it, and for safe disposal or for safe archiving to ensure that this dangerous artifact is not otherwise dealt with. What they do with the rest of the vault and the rest of the people there, that's not really the Viosians' concern. Now, that being said, the Viosians actually do have a bit of a reputation for precision. I'm curious what they will think of however the party actually deals with this. So the party is, going down there, they're getting hold of the local block, which happens to be the Navarre Raiders, which is, I've referenced several times, they're one of the bigger chunks of the undermarket that's grown up in most of the western chunk of the continent. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to get in, and they've got a few options. In fact, I've deliberately made it as open as possible to allow them to plan however they want to get in there and however they want to do that. So that's kind of where they're at. They have been given their own private airship, which is ludicrously complicated, but it's okay because it has an autopilot that will take them wherever they need to go. And while they were going, Jovan reverted. His memories came back, and he had no idea exactly what happened. But he's been getting worse lately, and that's probably going to continue getting worse, depending on his actions, of course. I don't want to just railroad a player into a given location or situation or circumstance. So that's what's going on with that campaign. Then there's the second campaign, the second forum campaign, which is Coulson and Zeiss, who are running the forum campaign. Now, they have been doing a lot of politicking and awesome stuff. So they're building up the exchange primarily. If I haven't mentioned it before, the exchange is one of the other major groups that arose out of the death of the undermarket. It consists of a decent chunk of the Holtberg province and a few, surrounding areas, and their influence has been spreading throughout that particular region. They, God, that's driving me crazy. I need to deal with that after I finish recording. They have been doing the best they can to try and ensure that they are a good criminal organization rather than a hideously evil one, but they're totally willing to be hideously evil if need be. They've been having a fairly regular problem with spies because of the way Alluvian culture works. Because for the most part, the spies that work that are professional spies aren't actually spies for someone. They're just spies. They may do information for you, but there's always that feeling that their information is also for sale for everyone else. And Zeiss has been slowly trying to build up spies that are personally loyal to him, and it's been an uphill battle because that's just not done. There's very, very precious few spies in the world that just spy for one group or one organization or one individual. There was also some issues with someone trying to go after the group. They're not sure who, and a weird situation where some of their own people were being turned against them, and I'm not going to go too much further into that. After having dealt with all this crap, they finally get this meeting with the High Queen, who has suddenly resurged. She's been in hiding for years at this point. She suddenly makes a resurgence in the company of a Sotiris, or excuse me, maybe it was a Timidian. Either way, one of the Eleven's automated minions, okay? So they request an audience with her, where she is actually flanked by Terebrus, which are the combat models, if you're paying attention. And she lays out a lot of stuff for them. Basically, she makes it very clear that she speaks for the 11 now, and she wants to make sure things go the proper way. The party, Zeiss and Coulson basically say, we are at your disposal on this one. We would like to, make Holtberg great again. But in addition to this, they realize that they're treading on some dangerous ground, and they have just decided to make one ally instead of others. There's also a weird thing where there was a attempt to bribe the party into betraying Alluvia for a sneak attack, which they believe came from the Directorate. It didn't, but every indication was such that it was coming from the Directorate. So they report this to her, which is relevant because now the High Queen thinks the Directorate is plotting against her. So she maneuvers the situation, and they help her, she helps them. They have this whole expedition planned to marry Lascelles. I'm not actually sure what's going to happen to that now. And a lot of cool, awesome stuff happens. I just want to share one thing. Probably my favorite thing that they did was they make this thing, this shadow depository. It's the super vault, where you can, if the super wealthy or super powerful or whoever can put, things and know that they're going to be very, very secure. And there's no desire to rip off or steal any of the things in there on behalf of the exchange, because that would completely hurt their cred. I mean, they want more people to use this thing, and they want to have the wealth and affluence necessary that comes from being this very, very secure vault. And so they've been building this thing. It's a cool idea. I like it. I had a bunch of plans for what I could do for them in the future, which obviously are not happening now. And they've been working on that. They've got this whole inn, the Butterfly Inn, I want to think it was called, because Zeiss is actually a butterfly in human disguise. And they want this Butterfly Inn to be like a place where the elite or the powerful or the criminals, can all meet and gather and be spied on or have security, that kind of a thing. A couple of the cool ideas the Exchange has been doing, and it's been really pushing the Exchange's power base. So the players decide to do something radical and crazy, which I actually approved of. They want to try and approach the Tumoroks with a peace/trade agreement. They kind of want the Tumorok on the side of Alluvia. Now, if you know anything about my setting, you know how insane that sounds, since there's been quite literally zero communication with the Tumorok in the 30 or so years since they invaded. And so they arrange for the 11 to teleport them in. They've got an exit material ready to go, in case they need to get out, at great expense, actually. And they have, or maybe it wasn't. I swear, yeah, it doesn't matter. They bring Pokemon with them. For those of you who don't know where Pokemon are actually in Primus, logically, if you understand the backstory of the setting. So they bring them thinking that the peace field that the Pokemon emit will help. And of course, they're cute and cuddly, so maybe that'll help. And they encounter the Tumorok. Now, I'm going to fail miserably at describing this, because I've spent so much time and effort working on the Tumorok. You may or may not have noticed, I go out of my way to differentiate the way I say the word Tumorok. There's actually 4 iterations of this word total, not all of which are audibly apparent. So there's the Tumoroks, okay? I try to say it like that to differentiate it. It's not spelled differently. The Tumoroks are the ones who are back on Mare Lacelle, who have no concept of ownership. Okay, they're the ones that the original live campaign encountered. Then there's the Tumoroks, which are hard to describe. Then there's the Tumorok, which refers to the organization, and then there's the Tumorok, which refers to, I suppose you could call it the leader of the Tumorok. So there's the Tumorok, capital T, and then the Tumorok, the organization, who leads the Tumoroks, and then there's the Tumoroks. You with me so far? I've been doing this the whole campaign. I've been doing this for like 2 years in real time, trying to differentiate them and leaving little hints when referring to them. So they go to interact with the Tumorok, and they encounter a blasted, ruined city that is pristine. So what I mean by that is there's chunks of walls destroyed, and there's clear signs of damage and destruction, and yet all of the destruction has no dust and no grit on it. It's like it was polished down to a sheen. It's like Disneyland almost, very fake looking in how clean and well preserved it is, and they're weirded out by this naturally. They go through this completely clean city for a bit until they come across a completely alien looking structure, which is angular and has very sharp corners, made of some kind of sort of slick metal they're not quite capable of identifying, and having some pulsing energy moving through it. And they're like, I don't even know what to make of that. Right about now, one of the cleaning golems comes along, and they end up following it for a bit, out of not entirely sure what to do, until they encounter one of the actual Tumoroks. Now, so what happens is they basically set off an alarm because they're there, and therefore they are intruders. I mean, it's just logical, right? A large amount of golems start surrounding, and when I say a large, I mean in the hundreds. But none of them, like, there's certain clear models of golems around them, but there's not just one type. There's dozens and dozens of these platinum golems all surrounding them. And then one much, much larger golem, standing almost 2 or 3 times as tall as the other ones, comes stomping in, looking far more humanoid than the rest, and that's the one that speaks to them. That's the Tumorok. So, excuse me, that is the Tumorok's individual that they encountered. Let me try and make my phrasing clear. So they try to talk to this individual, and they approach it, as if it's a normal, sapient entity like all the other ones they've encountered. Obviously it's not, and so it doesn't even understand half the things they're saying to it, and has just this weird sort of lack of comprehension. Finally, they manage to convince this thing that they want to go, meet with its leaders, or leader as the case may be. So they are taken in escort with this massive army towards another location where a large number of the other Tumoroks gather. What begins as sort of a Q&A session where they ask a lot of questions. I think the only way I can do this justice is to literally just go down the list, so if you'll give me just a moment. because this was special. The Tumarok encounter. Yes, here we go. So, no, sorry, wrong page. That's when Zeiss attacks them without question. So, they offer a strawberry cake as a sign of friendship. What do you demand in exchange for the cake of strawberry? Is what's immediately said to them. They then say the concept of trade is understood, of course, and then Zeiss and Coulson are like, yes, we wish to negotiate with you. We wish to make trade relations, and then happen that, and so they go to summon the masters. That's when they are taken to them. There's a lot of long pauses in conversation, as if they're processing or consulting or whatever. So the party, the party asks to meet the Tumarok. Now that's amusing to me. Obviously, the party has no idea, but the party keeps wishing to speak with the Tumarok, capital T, in other words, the leadership. But they also refuse to speak to the Tumarok, capital T, because there's actually only one way to speak to the Tumarok, and that's directly. It is offered for them to have a procedure which will allow them to speak with the Tumarok. Zeiss constantly refers to this as being plugged into the Matrix, and which is close. And so the Tumarok as a group are just absolutely baffled. They have no idea how to deal with this. It's like someone walked up to you and said, "Hi, I'd like to say hello to you, but I refuse to talk to you." Like, it's just so confusing. They don't actually have a way to understand that. So that begins the Q&A session, finally. So it was asked, why did the Tumarok arrive on the conflict? Why occupy the territory that was once considered ours? We were contracted to conquer this land that we might have it for our own. What happened to all the inhabitants that once lived here? Most fled, those who did not died. There's a complication there. We'll get back to that. What happened to the have the Tumarok gone to Visay and Lassell, or Aphis Lassell? The answer is simply yes. Have you heard of the Vyotians? Yes, they are our contractors. In other words, the Vyotians are the ones who made the Tumarok do this. The purpose of a contract is you demand and then you return an equal value. Direct communication would require the procedure, as I mentioned previously. Are you allowed to... One of the questions is, what exactly are the Vyotians? We do not know, was the answer to that one. And they give this answer. Many years ago, we were with the other Tumaroks on our great home of Mary Lassell. The Vyotians later explained, though we do not understand the specifics, they were able to penetrate the barrier around the island and send messages in, seeing if anybody was present. Those of us who were curious and adventurous followed the message and found the Vyotians. They treated us well as guests and introduced new ideas and concepts to us. They offered us a contract, though they had to explain what a contract was. Coulson insists that the Tumaroks have pushed the humans onto the verge of extinction. The Tumaroks are confused by this and say, no, we haven't. They don't actually understand how to properly comprehend that. They claim that they wanted land of their own. The Vyotians gave them information and led them in battle. The humans were never enslaved, they insist, although, again, they don't fully understand the concept. The humans have better homes than they ever could. All the races should be so grateful. So one of the questions I was asked is, what do you think about the fate of the humans who were driven from their home? And that's the response to that. My God, there's so many questions. I'm just going to skip down. I'm not going to go down the list. There is so many questions here. So after a bit, it was determined by... so the GM spent like a couple of days in real time trying to figure out how to not kill the party. I'm serious. I spent time and effort thinking about this because the way they were acting, the Tumarok and their semi-alien, non-understanding indifference was just like, well, all right, we will destroy these things and move on with our lives. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I don't like just railroading my players into death. So how? And both players were adamant that they didn't want to have the procedure done. So I didn't want to railroad them into that. So I'm just staring at this like, how do I deal with this? And I consulted several GM friends of mine and several non-GM friends of mine, and I came up with an idea. So finally, like, all right, you guys get a reflex action. Now, I didn't tell them anything about what's happening, just that they got a reflex action, because that's how a reflex action works. You just reflexively do something in response to a movement, basically. So Zeiss decided, with no information whatsoever, to freak out. Has Adfoc do his strongest desperation attack, his summon, on the nearby assemblage, and then immediately teleport out, quick, go! Leaving the Pokemon behind, it's worth noting. So... So they teleport out. Now here's the thing. Exit, the spell, is one of the extremely few smart spells in Primus. It will teleport you to someplace that is currently considered safe for everyone in the group that is being teleported, which in this case would be Coulson and Zeiss. The thing is, it's a teleport. There's a bit of a barrier over the dry reach zone that actually refracts teleportation. So basically, if you could imagine the path, they started teleporting out and then immediately bounced right back in. So they teleport somewhere else into the dry reach zone, into different ruins. So they're like, oh god, what do we do? Advoc is destroyed. Now let me pause for a moment to explain this. This was a tricky one for me. One of the things I've talked about many times is how difficult it is as a GM to make the game matter without the threat of killing the players. In other words, I don't want to kill my players. I actively try to avoid doing that. But there has to be some tension, some significance, and some consequence. Otherwise, the players feel like they're playing in cheat mode. They can just do whatever. It doesn't matter because as long as they know I'm not going to kill them, right? I've had that problem before. So I've tried many times over the many, many years to try and learn different ways in which I can hurt the players, show them consequence, show them significance, threaten things they care about, without actually killing them. In other words, to try and make it so that there is some difficulty to the game, even knowing they cannot die. You with me? Now, of course, they can die. I mean, if a player does something really stupid, I'll let them die. But with this whole Tumrock thing, I really didn't want Coulson and Zeiss to die, which is funny, given what happened, but whatever. Should just kill them off. So they, in hindsight, that's probably why Coulson was asking me to do that. So I mashed this out through my head. I finally come up with an idea. The idea is that the Tumoroks, during their deliberation, had no idea how to deal with this. I mean, these two entities before them are utterly confusing, using terms they don't even fully understand, and so they're like, okay, they petitioned the Vyotians. They said, what do we do about these people? The Vyotians, of course, are far more versed and knowledgeable and experienced and wise of a race, so they say, don't worry, we got someone. And they pull in an agent of theirs to go and personally deal with this situation, because the Vyotians are worried that any other race getting involved with the Tumorok is a bad thing. But furthermore, they also want this to be dealt with as quickly and quietly as possible. So they send someone named Zariel. So Zariel actually uses her personal private Vyotian airship, which is kind of small. It's basically a little shuttle kind of a thing, to go pick them up and deal with them as she sees fit. So Zariel picks them up. Now this amuses me greatly, because they're like, oh, thank God Zariel's here. Thank you for saving us, thank you. And then she starts driving them back towards the Tumorok, because she decided that they needed to answer to the Tumorok. Now, I find this interesting because she is basically the salvation of these two characters. In character, right? They then spend the entire trip speechifying at her to try and convince her to join them against the Tumorok and the Vyotians. So, obviously that doesn't succeed, although it does affect... Sis has talked to me, it does affect Zariel deeply, and she basically stops acting quite the same way as a result of how much that hurts. She drops them off. Now, they are let off, and it's like, okay, now you have to answer to the Tumarok, capital T. And Zerial starts acting as a go-between for them, trying to explain it in Tumarokian terms, exactly what's happening and why it's happening. Then things get weird. The Primus campaign has been going for many years now, as has the forum side of the Primus campaign. I opened it up as a desperate bid to keep my mind going when I was in monumental nightmarish pain. That was back when the kidney stones were still a very serious issue. I didn't even know what they were yet at the time. I didn't even realize I had the 30-some-odd kidney stones in my left kidney at the time. So, Coulson and Zeiss had both been as in the party as those characters since then. Coulson gave me a well-written speech that basically said, your campaign sucks. He didn't like... It's a coffee situation. And, of course, no rancor or negative feelings at all towards Coulson for this. Because that's why that whole term, coffee, exists. He basically said, this campaign is not for me. I don't want to play in it anymore. So he's retiring. He's not going to re-roll. He's just out. He has quit the game. Now, Zeiss, and again, I totally get this, has also decided to quit the game. His stated reason being that he wants to play with his friend. And I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. There are several games out there that I could have played and could have kept playing that I have refused to, because I was either playing with Gary or playing with Pax or whatever, so that makes sense to me. So, Coulson and Zeiss have left Primus, and that campaign has now ceased. As a result of that... I won't lie to you, that caught me completely by surprise. I didn't see that coming. Although, again, in hindsight, I should have, especially since Coulson kept asking me to just kill off the players. What did happen, and I feel like revealing this because I'm not sure this information will ever see the light of day otherwise. So it turns out the Tumarok don't understand what the word die means, because they were told that what death is by their prisoners. Their prisoners insisting that if you keep us here, you will have killed us. We will die in this state. And so the Tumarok took in this information and decided to understand, okay, death in this circumstance means being imprisoned like this. Now that feels like a bit of a, and I admit that's a bit of a literary push, but it was also intended as a plot point because the Tumaroks as a race don't age. So they never actually really had a lot of experience with death, as you might imagine, since most of their known history is on a peaceful island, and any of their history prior to that was erased by the Scions. So this is how the concept of death was introduced to them. So what happened was the Tumarok, as an organization, invaded and just did this blitz campaign, claimed the whole Dry Reach Zone. Everyone who didn't manage to get out died. In other words, they were pulled in and put into this massive underground city, basically. It's cities, really. It's huge, because it's containing a few million people. And that's where they live now. Now, the Tumarok have access to fairly advanced technology, so they live, aside from the whole lack of freedom thing, let's make that clear, they are prisoners. But in terms of just basic aesthetics, medical needs, food needs, comforts, luxuries, that kind of thing, they actually live better lives than they had, or indeed were capable of living otherwise in the Dry Reach Zone. But I don't want to make it sound, I don't want to whitewash it, make it clear these people are imprisoned here, because the Tumarok were just getting used to the idea of ownership. It was a new thing to them. And so the act of owning is something that's very important to these Tumarok conceptually. So that's why they take such good care of the ruins that they claimed, because this is ours now. They're not like normal races. They don't want to make new buildings and make new cities and rebuild the ruins or erase them, whatever. That doesn't mean anything to them. This is ours. That's what matters. Furthermore, of course, there are these people who are now theirs. They are basically trophies of the Tumarok. These are ours. But as the Tumarok were taught by the Viosians, you take care of what's yours. That's why they are taken care of so well, is because that's part of the deal. That's part of what ownership means to the Tumarok. Whatever is yours, you take very, very careful care of. So guess where Coulson and Zeiss are now, and will be for the rest of their natural lives. They have been taken in as trophies by the Tumorok and now live in the massive underground city, along with the many, many other races that are down there. And there's all sorts, because the Dry Reach Zone encompassed Alluvian territory, Navari territory, a little bit of Osteth territory, and a bunch of Show territory. So there's representatives of basically every race down there. Every one of the major races, anyways. And that is the end of that campaign. Not quite the end I had in mind. I actually had a whole arc we were going to lead towards, which was going to tie the exchange into either the Queen or the Vyotians, depending on where they went with that. But whatever, now the exchange is basically under Sereth. And I'm not sure how he's going to deal with things once Alluvia starts nationalizing. But anyways, regardless, that gets you up to date on the 2 forum campaigns, or what is now the 1 forum campaign. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time, guys.